Welcome to Bits About Books, the home for conversations with authors of breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. I am your host, Shubhanjan Sarkar, founder of Pitchling, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where our mission is to make buying easy. Our guest today is Donna McGeorge, and we speak about her fascinating new book, Red Brick Thinking. Make space, find focus, move forward. Donna McGeorge is a speaker, best-selling author, and productivity provocateur who has spent her career helping people and organizations stop drowning in complexity and start focusing on what really matters.
It's funny that I've suddenly realized I have very clearly an identity of author and writer now that I didn't really have before. And I don't know at which book it became so, integrated. Up until then, it was like I'm a speaker and a trainer who writes books. Now I'm a writer and author who speaks at conferences. And it's a very interesting mindset shift.
Donna McGeorge began her career managing theatre and concert tours across the UK, where she learned the art of engaging audiences, telling compelling stories, and keeping the show moving no matter what. From there, she shifted to the corporate stage, leading organizational development for global giants like Ford in Shanghai. It was here she saw firsthand how leaders and teams overload themselves with unnecessary effort, systems, and processes that do little more than drain energy. Today, Donna works with organizations around the world with a trademark blend of no-nonsense practicality and good humor. She has a knack for making complex ideas feel not only simple, but also irresistibly doable. She is the author of more than a dozen books, including her acclaimed It's About Time series, the best-selling ChatGPT Revolution, and her latest work, Red Brick Thinking, which we will talk about today. Donna's insights have been featured on Channel 9's Today Show, Channel 7 Sunrise, and in respected publications including Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Fast Company, Smart Company, The Age, and Boss Magazine. Clients who trust Donna with their people include L'Oreal, Unilever, Jetstar, Ernst & Young, Seek, Xero, and the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood. Now, onto this simple episode with Donna McGeorge. Donna, welcome to Bits About Books. I'm delighted that we are here today.
I am too, Sivanjan, and for your listeners, just in case, we've had to get over a few hurdles to get here, so this makes it even more special.
Yes, and I hope that the accident that you had and this prolonged process that you're going through doesn't stop the next book from coming out.
Oh, I've already got more ideas for more books, and I get in trouble when I do that because I've barely just got one out and I'm already thinking about the next one. So,
when you write 14 books, I think that becomes a way of life, right?
It is. It's funny that I've suddenly realized I have very clearly an identity of author and writer now that I didn't really have before. And I don't know at which book it became so integrated. Up until then, it was like I'm a speaker and a trainer who writes books. Now I'm a writer and author who speaks at conferences, and it's a very interesting mindset shift.
Of course. Talking about red brick thinking, when did you actually decide that this is a book and this needs to be written?
It was a bit of a perfect storm, if you will, of circumstances. So I had been I'd gone to a kind of small business person seminar thing. And one of the activities that the facilitator got us to do was to make up a word by mashing up words and ideas. And so, for example, his word is solopreneur. So he's mashed up solo operator and entrepreneur to make this new word. And so we were mucking around with that. And I was like, oh, gee, I wish I had something like that. And I kept playing around. And anyway, it didn't move. Then I was hanging out with a bunch of friends. And I said, I think there's some juice in this idea of my little Lego activity that I do with people in workshops. And one of them said, yeah, it's a bit like you've got your very own red brick theory or red brick thinking. And I went, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I was getting some coaching on one of my presentations, and I shared the little Lego bridge thing that I do. And I said, and so I refer to this as red brick thinking. And the guy that was coaching me nearly fell off his chair that he thought it was the best idea since sliced bread. So those three kind of data points, I then sat down and went, all right, I think this is a thing. And so I had already pitched a book to my publisher, and they've said, yep. And I'd already written 15,000 words into it. And then I messaged them and said, hey, I've got an idea for something else, and I think it's better than what I was going to write. And so I pitched the idea of the Red Brick Thinking book, and they were all over it as well. And, you know, the rest is history.
That's fascinating. So tell us a little bit about the experiment that you do with your Lego bricks in your workshop, and then let's talk about...
I can even show you. Hang on a sec.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Sure. Why not?
For anyone who's watching, I can show you, and I'll try and explain it for those who are listening a little more. So this came about. So it's interesting because another way I could have answered your question about where did the Red Brick Thinking book come from could have been I've been writing a version of it. I reckon, you know, my It's About Time series, the one about meetings and time, you know, managing time, it's kind of been about red brick thinking all along, but I just didn't know it. And so when I was researching the book, Got my finger in the right place, the one-day refund, the purple one, I started doing workshops with people on something called adaptive capacity, which is largely what that book is about. And so I would do this exercise with a little Lego bridge. And so for those who are just listening, it's a very simple Lego bridge with kind of a bridge at the top and then two legs coming down the sides, and one leg is shorter than the other. And I would offer people, you know, I'd put it on their desks and I'd give them a few extra Lego bricks, and I would just say, how would you go about fixing this little Lego bridge so that it was even? And 95% of people grab a brick and they stick it on the bottom, and then they go, there you go, now it's even. So now I've got two legs the same length. Hardly anyone thought about taking the brick off the long leg so that both legs were shorter and still were even. So that the task is to make them even, not necessarily to make them more beautiful or anything. It was just make them even. And it was again a kind of fluky moment where I was doing this exercise and I realized I'd put a red brick at the bottom of the long leg. And so when I said to people, did anyone think about taking the red brick off? Then I was like, oh, red brick thinking. And you know, again, here we are. And so this is based on some research. Again, when I was researching the One-Day Refund book, I came across a study that talked about our propensity towards addition bias. When we're presented with a problem, our instinct is to add. And so I started asking my clients, and when I would speak and when I would talk, what would happen if you removed the red brick? And are there red bricks in your world that you could take away? So that the next time you're presented with a problem, instead of saying, what can we add to fix this, ask yourself, is there something we could take away, remove, or stop doing that would make this problem go away in some way? So that's again, so the roots again of this book had been coming for at least 3 years by the time I got to it.
So when did you actually start writing? But you said that you already were, working on the book on refund and one-day refund, and that's when the research sort of gave you some material which you didn't yet know was part of this new book, but it was already there floating in your mind and you're looking at it and so on. When did you actually start writing the book?
I would say February last year. So about a year ago, I actually started, pulling, might have even been in March. I'd have to go look it up. But I know it was because my publisher needed the manuscript by July, and they usually give me 3 months. So backwards from there, like June, May, April. So I reckon maybe March, I started literally pulling words together.
Right. And how did you go about structuring it? Because it's pretty well structured.
Thank you for saying that, because this is probably the most emergent book I've done. The It's About Time books have a very particular structure about them, and they were all fairly identical with how they were structured. Whereas this one, I felt like this was more of a manifesto than it was these are very how-to, almost like training manuals in book form. Whereas Red Brick Thinking was more of a mindset manifesto, more of a movement about how we think about doing things. And so when I did, my publisher asked me to do a book proposal, so I did. And when you do a book proposal, you've got to put a table of contents in and tell them how you're going to structure it and all the bits. Well, this book bears no resemblance whatsoever to what I proposed to the publisher. Now, the good news is I have a good relationship with my publisher, so they're okay with that. But it really emerged, and it kind of emerged, to say it came out of a dream feels a bit weird. But when I told my editor, I said, look, I think I've got a different way of structuring this, and it kind of came to me in a dream. She said, you're my only client that I would let do that, say I'm structuring my book based on a dream. So I'd structured it according to how many business books are structured, which is why you need to know about this. Kind of a few steps to follow, So chapters 1 and 2 and 3 usually are in the why. Chapters 4, 5 and 6 are usually here's how you go about doing it with some examples, and then kind of some conclusion at the end. But what came to me in the dream was I should refer to the red brick of something. So in the book, I talk about the red brick of more, the red brick of hustle, the red brick of relationships, the red brick of obligation. And how, we can remove a red brick by just taking a meeting out of our diary. That's pretty, good. Yet, when we think about our life bigger, there were red bricks that really were taking up a lot of energy. And then I started to notice that as I was kind of brainstorming to myself, what other, and it was quite autobiographical, actually, the most autobiographical of all my books. Where am I seeing red bricks that I need to remove? I then started to see that there could be categories here. And so then we had emotional red bricks, structural red bricks, and cultural red bricks. And I started to move some of the red bricks around in that. And it took us a long time to make, because sometimes we felt like we were forcing bricks and retrofitting them. So it took us a very long time to get them into the shape that it was. And that then created 15 chapters, because there was 3 red bricks in each of those structures.
Right. So tell me, once you decided, did you come up with the red brick of this, like red brick of more or red brick of someday? Did you make that list first? Was that something?
No, because I'd already started writing the book using a fairly standard business book structure. So the red brick of more was pretty much the opening. I think it was like the second chapter in why we need to pay attention to this and our obsession with more.
Right.
And so I'd probably written about 15 to 20,000 words, generally in the book, and that's when I had the dream. And so then I was able to just pull that content out and reorganize it into what I had and reshape the beginning, with a few other ideas.
Sure.
And so that's where, and again, it emerged, right? So I think it's really interesting. All my other books I've written pretty much from beginning to end in order. Right? Start at chapter 1, although a lot of the introductory bits I wait till the end, but pretty much start at chapter 1, chapter 2, and you work through. This one, I kind of started writing random red brick of relationships, red brick of this, just started writing those pieces, then started to order them and then thought, okay, I need a beginning and end here. And that's where we came up with the red brick revelation, which is where I talk about the little Lego puzzle and this and the study that I'd read and introduced that concept. And then at the end, we called it the red brick revolution. So we had revelation at the beginning, revolution at the end, where that was the call to action, go ahead and make change and how to do stuff. So I would say right till I sent the final manuscript, well, not the final manuscript, but the manuscript to the publisher for them to start playing around with it, we were still a bit all over the place and moving things around.
Very interesting. And when you are writing, for example, you get this idea that I need to write a red brick of perfectionism, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So would you actually, I mean, obviously you have the thought, you know, directionally what you need to write, because it's once you get the lens clear, it's very easy to sort of come up with the core material. But were you also doing some parallel research to see if there is some research available, is some already existing literature which is supporting your
yes.
view?
Just every single chapter. My process is I have an idea, I start to write about the idea, and then I go, oh, I better go find and see if, am I accidentally stealing someone else's idea?
Right.
So I better go look for that to make sure I'm not plagiarizing. What research is out there to support my thinking? So look, to say I have an academic background is very rich, but I remember 30 odd years ago when I studied, I remember a lecturer saying to me once, there is no such thing as an original idea. You have to back up every thought with some kind of underpinning research or something. So that sat with me forever. Right. And all my books are written with lots of underpinning research. So something like perfectionism, then I had to really do the work on how is perfectionism different to any of the others. So if I go with relationships and obligation for a second, there was a fair bit of overlap with those because a lot of our obligations are because of relationships.
Yeah.
And so then I had to really start to tease out where were there similarities, which was okay, and where were there differences. So yeah, with every chapter. And then there was somewhere we changed the name 10 times. I can't remember what it was now, but one of them, we were like, is it the red brick of this or the red brick of this? And, so I'd write 3 or 4, pretty much the same chapter, but with a slightly different angle because we kept changing the name and that changed it. And look, the other thing I did is I then go researching what's the story. Is there a real life story out in the world that supports what I'm saying? So in perfectionism, for example, I'm pretty sure it's a story of it's called something like it's a bit of software made in Australia about a goose that goes mad in a little country, in a little village in England. And they deliberately kept, or maybe that was the red brick of complication. See, here's where they overlap. They decided not to make a perfect game. They just put out a really basic game and it went, crazy. So I've got an idea. I need to make sure it's backed up with research. I have to have a story. Is there a metaphor that could kind of go with this? And then I usually have what is this chapter in my brain? What is this chapter really about? And what do I mean by that as a starting point?
Right. Talking of metaphor, I want to mention something my dad once told me.
Yes.
And, I'm from the east of India, bordering Bangladesh. So we speak the same language, which is Bengali.
Yep.
Spoken by, it's the third most spoken language in the world, by the way. But anyway.
I'm not at all surprised.
We are a populous side of the world, right?
It has to be Chinese, has to be number one, doesn't it?
But
Mandarin?
Chinese has multiple dialects, right? So that sort of divides it up. So it's Mandarin or Cantonese and so on and so forth.
Anyway, go on. I don't. Let's not get distracted.
No, that's all right. That's all right. So my father used to tell me that if you want to eat more, eat less. So it didn't. I mean, if you hear it, it doesn't make sense at all. So when I asked what does that mean, he said that look, if you eat less, you will be healthier, you live longer. And eventually you'll eat a lot more than you would.
Ultimately eat a lot more. And, this metaphor just works. This is pretty much what red brick thinking is about. If we take breaks, if we take the time, if we remove the things that are getting in the way of us doing our best work or living our best lives, it creates space and capacity for what's most important. And one of the biggest drivers for me with all of my writing, but particularly this book, is it breaks my heart to see people feel like they have to give their life and soul to their job. And they do that. And if you ask them, why do you work so hard? They'll say, to provide for my family. And I'll go, oh, that family that you barely ever see, that no one's talking to you, your teenage kids are pretty much grown up and moving out and you've never spent any time with them. And so for me, it's about, we've got to you could argue it's about perspective. We've got to put things into perspective. And what can we take out so that we can make the space for the most important things and have more of it, right? To your dad's point.
Absolutely. Have a richer life and
yes.
Right. Let's get to the book. So why a brick and why is it red? Let's start there.
Well, that's this, right? So because of the little Lego bridge, why a brick? Because it all started with this activity. And why is it red? Because by coincidence, one day, the brick at the bottom was red. And then I started to think, okay, so now this red brick can become an object, a red brick. It can become a verb, to red brick your world. It can, we need to red brick this. This is a red brick opportunity. And I thought that I would love for the phrase red brick to hit the Bengali dialect and everyone in the third largest language speaking area of the world would start referring to red bricks. We need to red brick this. You put too much stuff in here. Is there something we can red brick? I need to go off and red brick this today. That was kind of, and I wanted a very simple idea that people could get hold of and use. So that's the red brick.
It's time for a short break. Stay with us. After the break.
And so there comes a point at which you eventually either get weighed down heavily with any emotional mores, like I'm just taking on too much stuff, or your house starts to bust at the seams because you've got too much stuff. I'm looking at your bookshelf behind you. There's not a lot of room for much more in there. So there comes a time when you have to make a decision. And often what happens is we say my bookshelf is overflowing. And so you either get rid of a bunch of books, which is red bricking, or you do what most people do, which is I'll just buy another bookshelf.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end.
Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host for Bits About Books and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Let's dive right back into the episode where we left it. Let's touch upon this whole strategic thought about subtraction, right?
Yep.
Why subtraction needs to be focus, especially in this whole over-communicated, hyper, stimulated world that we live in.
We live in a world where more is considered best. I need more money, I need more stuff, I need more technology, I need more information, I just need more. Yeah. And so there comes a point at which you eventually either get weighed down heavily with any emotional mores, like I'm just taking on too much stuff, or your house starts to bust at the seams because you've got too much stuff. I'm looking at your bookshelf behind you. There's not a lot of room for much more in there. So there comes a time when you have to make a decision. And often what happens is we say my bookshelf is overflowing. And so you either get rid of a bunch of books, which is red bricking, or you do what most people do, which is I'll just buy another bookshelf. And this notion of addition bias and that thinking that we will add is just so prevalent. And I think it's worth examining. I mean, it is instinctive, it is pretty instinctive, because back in, cave people days, the more people in a village, we could collect more food, we could prepare better for the winter if you wanted, we could protect ourselves better. But then there comes a time when the more tips into a place where now it's creating problems. And I think this is going to sound it makes me sound like a global futurist or something, and I'm not one of those. But I actually think we are at a tipping point around this. You start to see it with younger generations. They're not doing ridiculous hours at work. They're not out buying the things all the time. There's a remarkable drop in retail and all of that stuff with the younger generations coming through, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of thoughts there. I think a part of what we see, and you are still in a privileged country, so to say.
Very much.
We come from very India is still a poor country. There is no debating that. And I think a lot of this more mindset comes from the underlying life of scarcity that we have seen. And partially here it's very real, and maybe in the Western hemisphere it's more about what is imprinted in the DNA, because we are coming from a stage where we were looking for food and it was not always available. We were looking for help and always not available, and so on. So a lot of that, I guess, is the reason why we got there. And then of course consumerism, right? So that's
yes.
part of it.
So I would say consumerism is probably more what I was talking about. Having said that, it's interesting. So yes, I'm in a very privileged country, and I was having a conversation with someone the other day. I think it was on another podcast, who had come from very, very, very humble beginnings, like very poor, humble beginnings, even in Australia, or relative to Australia, very poor, humble beginnings. And they said there's two brothers, and I was being interviewed by one brother who had learned the lesson early to make the most of what you've got rather than seeking more. And the second brother had seen the quote unquote poverty, because it's not even close to being called poverty, but we'll go with it for the moment, but had seen maybe the lack or had felt like he'd missed out. Well, he's a multimillionaire and he keeps accumulating real estate. And so we had this conversation about, well, when is enough? Because irrespective of, and again, this is a privileged thing for me to say, but irrespective of where you are, there is a moment where you go, have I got enough? Is this enough for me? And if it's not enough, keep accumulating more, right? But if it's enough, and I would say again, in a very consumer-driven, privileged world that I live in, we got way too much, too much.
There was this study, I forget the name. This lady was one of the family members of Walt Disney.
Ah, yes. Yep.
She was extremely rich. I forget the name for a moment. But what she in essence said, she was referring to a study, and it said that it doesn't matter where a person is. If you interview somebody and say, how much do you need? And that will be enough. So if somebody had $100,000, he would say $200,000.
Right.
If somebody had $1 billion, he'll say $2 billion.
Oh, there's plenty of them around, right? Plenty of billionaires around. It's like, Elon Musk, when will you have got enough, right? And you're absolutely right. And I had that hit home for me once when I was facilitating a workshop of small business owners. And we were all writing down, and I got them to say, like the 12 months is coming up. How much do you need to earn to cover all your expenses? And then how much would you like to earn to feel comfortable? And someone had written down a number that was about a third of what I earned. And it was a big moment for me to go, wow, okay, I'm not only super privileged, but I could probably reassess what I think my numbers should be just quietly. So, yeah, it is all relative.
Yeah. Let's talk. So you have structured the book and you have three major buckets. Yep. Apart from the revelation and the revolution, the three major buckets are cultural, structural, and emotional.
Yeah.
Right. So let's pick up one to illustrate the point, how you have approached the red brick, applied the red brick thinking to each of those. We spoke about more quite a bit right now, but let's pick another one, and this one looks interesting to me. So someday,
right?
What is the red brick of someday?
The red brick of someday.
That's part of the cultural red bricks.
Yeah. Okay. So we kind of have because they're all connected, and even in Australia, we have the hangover from World War II, excuse me, and English influenced culture from Victorian England.
Yeah.
Which was all based on scarcity and poverty and excuse me. And so what happens is there are generations before me, we'll call them boomers for the moment, but my parents fall into that category, where they just keep stuff forever in case they might need it. So it's the just in case stuff. And so when we were helping my parents move, we found out that my mother had like 19 sets of sheets for beds. She only got 2 beds in the house. And we said, what do you need 19 sets of sheets for? And she said, oh, just in case we get guests. And I said, I kind of understand it, but where are they going to sleep? Because you haven't got 17 beds to make up. And that really got me thinking. And she was also, she's got the dining set, like crockery, that is for best. She's got several outfits that she only wears for best. And, you know, I think that's a throwback to a time when you kind of had 3 outfits. You had, you know, you're going to school, your yard clothes, and your church on Sunday or whatever your, you know, religious thing was, or your best outfit. And you might have only had 3 outfits, and so it made sense to keep them compartmentalised like that. Now it's hard to tell what's best, right? And so it started with that thinking, and then it evolved to how often we put things off for some imagined future that we might have. And then, and I don't want to get too morbid about this, but there's plenty of data, and well, I didn't write about this in the book, but there's plenty of data to support that the person works very hard and into their late 60s. They plan to have a round the world trip and then drop dead of a heart attack, you know, as they're boarding the plane, kind of stuff. Yeah. And so for me, it was like, how do we recognize what we want and figure out how to have more of that now rather than putting off that till someday. Now, I have had, it's funny you should mention this particular chapter, because I did get some pushback around, we've still got to save for our retirement. We've still got to make sure that we're comfortable. And I'm like, yes, and be realistic about what you think retirement even looks like. Because some people want to have so much money and stuff in their retirement that they don't live the life they're living now. And I got to tell you, by the time you're 70, I don't think you want to go around the world 150 times, right? Whereas now you got the energy for it. So that's kind of where that one came about. And I think in there I tell stories about people that win the lottery, which is what we all think. Well, if I won the lottery, then I'll get a boat, or then I'll have an overseas trip. And the amount of people that win the lottery and then just squander it, right? And so it's like, don't wait. Figure out ways to make it happen now.
Yeah. This is great. Let's talk about the structural red bricks, and let's talk about urgency.
Yeah. Look, that one we moved around a lot, because that could have fallen into cultural as well, right? So cultural is about how we are influenced by all the things around us, like culture. It's just because it's the way it's always been done is kind of that. And so we really pushed around with this one where we'll go, and we put it into structural in the end, because we did think that sometimes our life is structured around urgency and our belief that everything has to be urgent. And so this is this particular one for me was, again, nearly autobiographical, coming out of organisations where I used to work, where I don't remember ever a time where someone said, can you please get this done for me? And it doesn't matter when you do it, or, you know, take your time, or it can be done in 3 weeks. It was always urgent, ASAP, right now. And so I really wanted to invite people to examine this chapter for me was more about examining the truth of urgency. Do things have to be, is it really urgent? You know, and what does urgent mean, and urgent for who? And again, it's not so much saying no to someone when they say this is urgent. It's really checking your own language and saying, how often do you assume urgency when it doesn't exist for yourself or for others? I always joke about how the most productive day of the year for most people is the day before they go on vacation. And that's because they treat the whole day through a sense of urgency. I've got to get everything done by this time because then I can go on my vacation. And funnily enough, there's even a phenomenon that people work so hard in the lead up to vacay, they end up sick on their holidays, which is just crazy. We do the same thing with Fridays. I have to have this done by Friday. We then even do the same thing around 5 o'clock. I have to have this done by 5 o'clock. And so this chapter was really questioning, do you? You're going to come back to work tomorrow. You know, all the emails that you're trying to clear by 5 o'clock on a Friday, you're going to have a mile more when you come back in on the Monday. Your to-do list will never end. So it was an invitation to just chill and say, work is relentless in nature. Don't push yourself so hard to tick off things on a to-do list when it could actually wait.
Right. Absolutely. I totally see the sense of it. And you're right. I mean, when you are in your working years, work doesn't end. There is no end to it.
There's no end.
Right? Yeah. So all this, I mean, while one side, I see the reason why you should not have clutter. That's a good thing. At the same time, being obsessed about a zero inbox is really possibly not necessary.
I actually do have a zero inbox, and I've been working that way for probably about 5 years. But it's a daily practice to do that. And it's not like I say to myself, oh, I'm not leaving today until my inbox is at zero. I look at it and go, okay, so there's 3 things there. I'll sort them out in the morning. And so I would even argue that it's not even by Friday. So at most I have half a dozen things sitting in my inbox at any one time, but I frequently get to zero because I have systems to get things out of my inbox. It doesn't mean the work is done. So a lot of people use their inbox as either they're obsessed about zero inbox or they use it as a to-do list or a parking lot. And before they know it, they got 11,522 emails sitting in there. So I have a system for getting them out. And again, this could even be my age and history because I'm old enough to remember working life before email when we'd have an in tray on our desk and the male person's job was to pop around and pop pieces of paper, mail that had come, memos, whatever, and they'd sit in your in tray. And I made it my business to try and clear my in tray each day. So make sure I'd read memos, filed them, responded them, chucked them, whatever I needed to do. And so I translated that kind of thinking into and that's why it's called an inbox, by the way, any youngsters listening right now. It's called an inbox in your email and it looks like a little tray because that's where it came from. So I'm going to say anyone who's obsessed with trying to get zero inbox, it's possible to do it and tell them to send me an email and I'll give them some instructions on how they can do that. But ultimately, I would argue, for what purpose? For what purpose? Yep.
Yeah, totally. Makes sense. Would you want to choose what you want to talk about in the emotional red bricks section?
Oh, gee, probably obligation, I think.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah. And this is a really interesting one. And it has cultural overlays, not from the book, but just from where you are in the world, because there's different cultural constructs around what we think of as familial obligations that are very different, so how people who are living in India would view their obligations to family are very different to how we view obligations to family here in Australia. So I kind of want to say that very clearly. And I do want to say sometimes we say yes to a whole bunch of things that we later resent. Yeah. And so the angle I'm going to put on this is there are some obligations that we do with joy and love, right? I've got elderly parents with joy and love. I have no trouble going and caring for them, taking them shopping, taking them to doctor's appointments, all of those kind of things. I do that with love. And there are other obligations that I say yes to, and then I go, ugh, why did I say yes to that? And then I feel resentful about showing up to it. And then I'm cranky at myself for doing it. And then, and then that's exhausting. So emotions like resentment and frustration and all of those, they use way more energy than, say, surrender, for example, just surrender to it. And so this chapter was about really examining where you're saying yes to things through a sense of obligation or guilt. Yeah. And where you sense obligation and guilt, it's worth exploring. Is this a red brick I could remove? Is this a boundary I need to put in place? And despite the fact that I'm quite happy to look after my parents, we still have boundaries in place around when they can. Well, my mother likes to have a chat. So the boundaries around when can she call me for a chat? When do I call her? When there's nothing wrong in the world, when is it appropriate to reach out? Blah, blah, blah. And we put boundaries in place to support those things. So I don't end up feeling like every time I see the phone ring, it's my mother, I've got to pick it up. right? And that was removing a red brick of that level of obligation. So sometimes it happens in work. We feel obliged to work back long hours. We feel obliged to take on extra work and projects. And so again, the trigger for this one to say there's a thing here, there's something worth exploring here is, how do you feel when you say yes? And what is your reason for saying yes? Okay. Doing it with joy and love, continue doing it. Guilt, resentment, obligation, yeah, that's worth thinking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So talking about the revolution, how, somebody who is not living the red brick way.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot, actually, when you think of the lens, there's a lot that you can do using this. How, according to you, how difficult is it for somebody to switch to this mode of thinking?
Okay, so I don't think it's difficult to think about, is there something I can remove, and asking that question. Actually removing it is a bit tricky. Yeah. And I would say, in the book I talk about small R red bricks and large R red bricks. And so small R red bricks are kind of small irritations. It's the people that come up to you at work and say, hey, have you got a minute? Or it's, some meetings, or I always think about small R is if you look at your bench top in your kitchen or on your desk or something like that, and it's a bit messy, tidying that up is a small R red brick. Now, the interesting thing is keeping the small R red bricks under control or removing them makes space for the big R red bricks. And so I would say the 15 chapters are big R red bricks. And so it would be worth, looking at, are there some small things I can get out of the way first? And so big R red bricks are big because they take a lot more effort. They often can take up both mental and physical space. And to continue the metaphor, they're wedged in deep, and they're concreted into systems and cultures and lives. And so getting them out is much harder. But I think when you make big R red brick changes, they are transformational for yourself and for people around you. And so my advice is always to look around and see what's small, what is something, like, could you go tidy up your garage? Could you clean out your guest room? Could you get your office in shape? Could you have a clean desk policy so that at the end of the day you tidy your desk and, the next day everything starts fresh? So they're little R red bricks, and get into the habit of it. The other thing I'd say is, and I say this at the beginning of the book, you don't have to do every chapter. In fact, I would even argue you don't have to read every chapter. I'd scan the table of contents, and I kind of wrote it this way as well. Scan the table of contents and look for one that you think, I think I do too much obligation, or I think I've got some relationships that could be exploring, or I can really feel I'm in hustle mode. Like, pick a chapter that you think might resonate with you and have a read of that first, and see if there's some easy ones to remove. The only thing I'd say is eventually go back and look at them, because sometimes your red bricks are hidden, right? Yeah. It's not till you read the chapter and then you go, oh, okay, I got a pile of red bricks here that I could work on. Yeah.
Right. Where does this go next, according to you? Where does this book go next? You're talking of a movement. So what is it that you envision this book to be?
I have high ambitions for this book. I actually have high ambitions for the idea, for the movement. I was at a meditation retreat back in June last year, and we were doing a specific meditation around manifestation. And I thought going into it, I already know what I'm going to manifest. I'm going to manifest, selling 1 million copies of my books, making millions of dollars, blah, 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 being all over the world, speaking about it, blah, 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 already decided. And I get into the meditation, and the yogi that was running it for us was incredible. She took us really deep, and all of a sudden my internal chatter shut up, and this voice said, you're going to touch 1 million lives. And I was like, okay. This has nothing to do with volume or dollars. This is just about getting the message out there and getting more people talking about it. If they happen to buy the book, that's great. But I do know for me that means talking on podcasts and talking to people like yourself and, you know, getting your subscribers interested in the concept. It's getting on stages to speak at conferences. It's talking to people in organisations to spread the word. So the book's gone well. It always makes a difference if you have a best-selling book. So it was in Australia, it made the top 30 for 2025, even with only 2 months of sales, which is pretty good. Things slowed down a bit when I fell over and broke my arm. So I'm kind of now getting back into gear again with it. But that was a long way around saying my ambition here is I want to touch 1 million lives with this book. I have no idea what the evidence of that will be. I figured I'll go into a deep meditation one day and something will tell me, yes, you've done it, or good job, or now go for the next million, or whatever it might be.
Donna, this has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
I'm thrilled to have been here. I'm so glad we made this happen, Spanjan. Really happy.
Absolutely, and we should talk about your other books as the time and opportunity arises.
Well, you know, I know you're wrapping up, and I should come back because there's a different reason I wrote every book. And it wasn't just to write another book. There was a legitimate strategic reason why I wrote every single book. And I think your listeners might enjoy listening to that little journey as well. How do you end up writing 14 or 15 books? Yeah, you got to be strategic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything else? I mean, obviously, we haven't spoken exhaustively. It's not even possible to speak exhaustively about this. Is there anything else you would like to talk about?
Look, I don't think so, but if I'm looking for the opportunity to have a final word, one of the things that I often say to people when you're thinking about red bricks in your life, where is a red brick you could remove that your future self would be so grateful for and that they would thank you, and that you would look back and go, my life is much more peaceful now because I made a hard decision some time ago. And so for me that, and sometimes it can be simple, removing a meeting from a recurring meeting from a calendar, or it could be something pretty profound like a relationship. And I don't mean a marriage. I just mean, a relationship you're in that's just not serving you. And you know that your life will be more peaceful without it. So what could you do that your future self will thank you for?
Wonderful.
Bits About Books is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink makes buying easy by enabling high-quality engagement between buyers and sellers through its presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create customized sales narratives using sales collaterals and personal videos and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversations. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 99021 631 32.
One last question. Did any of your readers write to you saying, Donna, I read the book and these are the bricks I removed, and oh my God, I'm so glad I did that?
Probably not specific about red bricks. I've had heaps of people write to me and say, it sounds big to say this changed my life, or I'm really examining things in my world, or I'm making it my project. One woman said, my 2026 project is to red brick my world. So I've had lots of people give very positive feedback around that, how it's prompted them to think differently about how they're doing their world. But I can't think of a specific, I removed my red brick and this is what happened. Not yet. Anyway, it's only been a couple of months.
Yeah, it's just a couple. Exactly. I mean, I'm sure there'll be stories like this which will go into your next edition.
Yes,
which I hope
maybe.
which I hope is soon. Donna, thank you so much. I really appreciate your coming on the show and talking and being patient with my inquisitiveness. And
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
We have a fantastic lineup over the next couple of episodes with great conversations on breakthrough books. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you do not miss a single episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for being with us today on Bits About Books, where we talk to authors about breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. We hope this conversation helped inform and motivate as we all navigate a rapidly changing business environment. For us, these are enlightening conversations enriched with knowledge and expertise. We encourage you to go out and buy the book to learn firsthand and implement some of the great ideas we discussed today. We hope to have you with us again in the next exciting episode of Bits About Books. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast from, and give us a rating while you are at it.
This Bizcast original podcast is produced for PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where the mission is to make buying easy. Hosted by Subhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time and have a wonderful day.